What is going on, everybody? This is James Krisnerick here, live for another podcast of Real Steel Sports on Spreaker Web Radio. For those of you that have been paying attention to YouTube activity, I was featured in a sports segment about the NBA Finals between the Miami Heat and the San Antonio Spurs with a fellow YouTube user of mine named Quaman, Qaaman. Be sure to go ahead and look at his videos because we're starting to do a new segment on sports every now and then, and be sure to tune in to what we have to say. But let's get straight into this video. I've decided that, I'm not going to be able to do this Sunday through Wednesday night, but because I'm going away for a few days. But Thursday night, I'm going to do the next segment on running backs and wide receivers on the top 100 list of 2014. I'm starting off this one with the quarterback list. In all honesty, it's the high-profile position in the sport, and it's the sport whenever people think about it. Sorry for the notification. That was Twitter that popped up. Someone's tweeting me about this broadcast. Hang on a second. This could take a second. And what I would like to point out is that while there are some things I feel that this list did get correct, there are still several things about this list that I would like to point out that kind of left me a little perplexed. So without wasting more time, let's get started. First off, we need to talk about who actually was on the top 100 list of 2014. And here were the quarterbacks listed. At number 100, Matthew Stafford. Number 81, Colin Kaepernick. 71, Tony Romo. 70, Nick Foles. 58, Joe Flacco. 34, Phillip Rivers. 31, Ben Roethlisberger. 30, Andrew Luck. 24, Cam Newton. 20, Russell Wilson. 11, Aaron Rodgers. 6, Drew Brees. 3, Tom Brady. And number 1, Peyton Manning. Now, there is one huge issue that I have with this list, and that's the idea that Cam Newton is ahead of Ben Roethlisberger. That bothers me because, and it's not because I'm a Steeler fan. Believe me, the fact that there were a few Steelers on this list anyway, and there weren't like that many, didn't surprise me, and it didn't bother me at all because I'm accepting it from the analytical standpoint. Ben Roethlisberger is, and will always be a better quarterback than Cam Newton. Cam Newton has proven in certain times that he is not very accurate from the pocket and that he relies on his movement too much and ultimately can make mental mistakes. Ben Roethlisberger is such a cleaner passer and he makes such a low number of mistakes. If you look at the last 2 years of his career when he's pretty much just been butting heads with the offensive coordinator, his numbers have been very impressive. 28 touchdowns this year, 26 the year before. He has had 2 very good years with Todd Haley as the OC, and it's been in a system that has not A, been beneficiary to him, and B, when you stop and think about it, he's still been putting up numbers. It's incredible. So let's go any more detail. The top 4 quarterbacks in the NFL are Brady, Manning, Brees, and Rodgers in no particular order. I'll go through that a little bit later. But Ben definitely needs to be higher than Cam Newton. And honestly, I think Andrew Luck needs to be higher as well because Andrew Luck has a playoff win. And Andrew Luck also is a more consistent overall quarterback. I would definitely take Andrew Luck because, let's put it this way. Late in the game, Andrew Luck's got that ability to bring you back. If Cam Newton gets down by 28 points, he's not making a big comeback because although he can move and although he can throw the football, he still has some issues with his mechanics and he's still not very clean in the pocket. I actually thought Russell Wilson was correctly placed in this list, albeit though still kind of early to put him ahead of Luck and Newton and obviously Roethlisberger. I thought Phillip Rivers actually should have been ranked higher than Cam Newton. I'll be honest with you, because if you look at Cam Newton's season from a statistical standpoint, 12 wins, the NFC South title, and a first-round loss in the playoffs, his numbers are not that great. Just over 61% completion, 24 touchdowns, 13 picks, and a pass rating of 88. The thing about it is that Cam Newton had arguably the second best defense in the NFL to back him up. It's not hate on Cam Newton. What I'm trying to do is get people to think. If you're down in a situation and you need someone to get you momentum, Russ Wilson, Andrew Luck, and Ben Roethlisberger are going to give you some momentum probably sooner than Cam Newton will. I'd probably put him in the mid-50s on the list and keep him right about there. Middle of the pack in terms of the quarterbacks on this list. Because if you look at them, we have 14 in total. And again, I've always felt that if we're talking about the best quarterbacks in football, the elite class is the big five: Manning, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, and Roethlisberger. If we're going to go a step down from that, I think that one guy that I think had a very, very underrated year that I think should be recognized for it is Rodgers. And the fact that he played well in spite of several injuries and missing half the year. I think an NFL ranking of 11th on this list is pretty preposterous. And I don't even like Aaron Rodgers. I really don't. I think that he is a little bit conceited. Then again, I think they all are. But the fact is that he seems to act sometimes like he's better than other people. But that's just the vibe I get from him. Even though I will give him credit, he still handled the Brett Favre situation, which was forever ago, very, very well, better than a lot of guys could have. And he's been a hell of a passer. But my take on this whole situation with the quarterbacks is that those are the best five right now. Manning, Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, and Roethlisberger, definitely. If I had to pick the next tier of quarterback, I would probably put Russell Wilson and Andrew Luck in that discussion. People say that Andrew Luck was one spot higher than Ben on this list, and I kind of disagree with that because Ben did have a better statistical year, and Andrew Luck overall had a better team around him. Even though whenever it came time to play in the clutch, Luck was better. So you can make an argument either way. But I'd have to say that Ben's fifth, and I'd probably put Luck sixth right now. But the one quarterback whose spot on this list completely mystifies me is Joe Flacco. I do not know exactly how he made this list. And an analysis of his statistics from this year will kind of prove what I'm talking about. He completed less than 60% of his passes, threw three more interceptions and touchdowns, and didn't crack 4,000 yards. And again, he never has. His pass rating dropped over 14 points from the year before. Now, there's another quarterback from that draft class that should have been on this list. Honestly, I think that in the grand scheme of things, Matt Ryan deserved to be in this list a lot more than Joe Flacco did. I'm going to give you Matt Ryan's numbers for this year. Completed almost over 67% of his passes for 4,515 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 17 picks. All while not having Roddy White for a lot of the year and Julius Jones for most of the year, and finishing with an absolutely horrid defense on the back end. So, if you go and look at the numbers and look at impact this year, I do not know how you can make an argument for Joe Flacco making this list. I really don't. The Ravens' defense was better this year than it was last year. It really was. And the fact that, they added some weapons in the offseason, and they may have gotten rid of Anquan Bolden, but if you look at the team in general, they had a significant drop-off from the year before. And Flacco going from plus 12 touchdowns and picks the year before to minus 3 just completely mystifies me. The fans get what I'm saying, though, because they did not rank him on the top 100, nor should they have. Another quarterback that honestly I'm kind of perplexed by his appearance in this list is Colin Kaepernick. And I don't dislike Colin Kaepernick, don't think I do. But I'm just trying to point out what he is from an actual analytical standpoint. If you look at some of the games he's been in his career against really good defenses, Seattle's defense several times. He's gone against the Ravens. He's gone against some other good defense, like in his division. Arizona's given him trouble. St. Louis has always given him trouble. He is not a very good overall passer. He can run. He is extremely athletic. He can make plays with his legs, and his arm, when he is dialed in, he's very good. But what you have to realize with Colin Kaepernick is that he's not very accurate. Same with Joe Flacco. Same with Cam Newton. They are not very accurate quarterbacks. And honestly, Kaepernick's numbers this year were not really that special. He completed fewer than his completion percentage dropped off from the year before. Although he threw 21 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, the fact is that 49ers defense kind of blew it up, and a lot of those were short-range scores. And also looking at his log as well, there were some games where he did not play very well at all. He did not play well in any of the games against Seattle. He played average in the playoffs, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, pass rating of 74, completion percentage uneven 55, and he only topped 300 yards twice all season. It just confused me because here we are talking about Kaepernick, a guy who's getting this incredible, overhaul to his contract and all this money, and he's really not even making plays worthy of that contract. Honestly, I think right now Ben Roethlisberger during his second year was so much ahead of Colin Kaepernick. But there is one thing I'm not going to dispute. I do believe that Peyton Manning deserves to be number 1 on this list for what he achieved last year. Absolutely. I think Drew Brees, honestly, even though he's my favorite player, is adequately placed at 6, and I think Brady is placed at 3rd. The problem I have is not quite sure I agree with Calvin Johnson at number 2. But in reality, when you stop and look at his numbers, I actually do take back what I said. I was actually thinking of another position on this list. And I'm not going to get into the wide receiver position until a later date, so you'll have to wait for that. I apologize for any kind of spoilers or anything like that. But I will make a comment about Calvin Johnson real quick. He's only played 106 career games and he's almost to 10,000 yards. That's ridiculous. But anyways, the quarterback list. I felt Russ Wilson actually deserved me maybe a couple spots higher because even though he had one of the best defenses in the NFL last year, he shined in the biggest moments, like late in the fourth quarter against the 49ers in the NFC title game. Played very well, very consistent in the Super Bowl. He's showing poise well beyond his years, and that's not something we're used to seeing out of a guy his age, his experience level. I knew he was going to be a success when he was in the pros. Coming out of Wisconsin, and also I think he played North Carolina State earlier before that. I didn't think he'd be this great. The one guy at quarterback that does get overlooked in this list is Phillip Rivers. I actually think he belongs right about where he was. I think he deserves to be ahead of Cam Newton. I'd actually say he had a very, very good year this year. I mean, you look at what he was. Last year, he was just a turnover machine last year, and the Chargers, really struggled going under 500. This year, his pass rating jumped over almost 20 points. Threw for 32 touchdowns and led the league with 69.5 completion percentage. The guy was balling. He had a great year. I think he definitely deserves to be ranked maybe a couple spots higher on this list. But if you just look at the sheer numbers, he did have a better year than Ben Roethlisberger. But the fact is, if we're comparing them as players right now, I don't think Phillip Rivers could ever be better than Ben Roethlisberger because of the difference in their games. Because Ben can move, and Ben is very, very good in the clutch. Rivers has struggled at times, and it's kind of funny because he's played well against good defenses, but he's not brought his A game against bad ones. I think that's kind of amusing. But another three quarterbacks I have not talked about in this list are Nick Foles, Tony Romo, and Matthew Stafford. Not quite sure I buy Stafford's position in this list either. His completion percentage, 58%, 29 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, better than what he was last year, but I'm starting to think that 41 touchdown season might be somewhat of an anomaly for him that he had in 2011 when he was just throwing balls everywhere, 5,038 yards. But you got to give Stafford some credit. He played on a Lions team that really wasn't that great on the defense. They had a decent run defense. I mean, they were able to hold some good teams down below their season totals. But when you just look in the sheer scheme of things, his team, he should have played better down the stretch. Look at some of the games. The 5-turnover game against the Bucs. You look at some of the games against the Eagles, Ravens, and Giants. If they would have won any one of those games, if they'd have won 2 of those games, they'd have taken the division. The Giants in overtime, the Minnesota Vikings, just games that they had no business losing. Tony Romo, on the other hand, I think is way underrated. It's funny because being a Steeler fan, you wouldn't think that I'd be partial to Tony Romo, but in reality, I think that he is one of the most unfortunate quarterbacks of this generation because I don't blame Tony Romo anymore for the problems of the Cowboys in the postseason or in the regular season. Here's my reasoning. It's Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the biggest problem with that football team because he thinks he can run this team the way he used to. He thinks that he gets all these star players that don't want to come in. He thinks he's going to get a bunch of Michael Irvins when really he's just getting a bunch of guys that are just happy to be there. The Dallas Cowboys are more or less turning into a country club, not a football team. And if you look at it, I mean, Des Bryant's a competitive guy. Sean Lee's a decently competitive guy. They get rid of DeMarcus Ware and a couple other big-name guys, but yet they bring in Brandon Whedon as the backup quarterback. I mean, I feel sorry for Tony Romo because he's a nice guy and is more than deserving of winning a Super Bowl. Could he be good enough to win one? That remains to be seen. But the fact is that I find it very, very unfortunate that he has to be stuck on that football team. I mean, if you just look the last few years at just how bad the Cowboys' defense has been. They allowed 400 points in 2012 for an average of 25 a game, and in terms of pass and run defense, ranked outside the top 18. Next year, arguably one of the worst defenses in the history of the league. 26th in points allowed. 32nd in the league in yards allowed, 30th against the pass, 27th against the run. Now, I know a lot of that had to do with injuries, but think about it. Even when this team had all its pieces in place, their defense was horrible, and he's just so unfortunate to be placed in this list. Not to be placed in this list, but to be placed, obviously, where he is in this list, but also his place in terms of NFL history, because he's always going to be remembered as one of those, kind of like, he's basically going to be looked at as a poor man's Jim Kelly in a way, because Jim Kelly could never win the big one, or Dan Marino, or other quarterbacks that couldn't win the big one. He's looked at that in that same breath, and he hasn't even reached the Super Bowl. By the way, I'd also like to make a shout out, speaking of Jim Kelly, I'm wishing you hopefully a strong recovery from your illness. I hope you can beat cancer and send it back where it came from, man. I hope everything is going better, and I hope you make a full recovery. But if I were to talk about Tony Romo, I think he's better at this point in his career than Cam Newton. I still think he's better than Cam Newton, yeah, because, I mean, it's not been his fault that he's been in the position he's in. He completed 69% of his passes this year, 63.9, 31 touchdowns, 3,828 yards for pass rating of 96. And if you look at his career in general, he has had some incredibly good years. And what also needs to be stated is the fact that without him, where would the Dallas Cowboys be? Let's just think about that for a second. If Tony Romo was playing for a different team, how bad would Dallas be? They would not have sniffed the playoffs. Like, imagine they'd had to go get somebody else in 06, 07 that could have potentially been a bust. They would never have sniffed the playoffs or even come close to winning the division in any of the years they did under Romo. Eli Manning, I felt, was a surprise omission from this list. But in a way, I'm not really that shocked because last year he had a decent year. The year before he was incandescent. He was just superb. This year, -9 in turnover in interception ratio. Not really sure that there's a spot for a quarterback on the list with that kind of total because that's just... Anytime you're throwing 27 interceptions, only 18 touchdowns, and your team's going under 500, it doesn't help your cause. So overall, my opinion on the top 100 quarterback list is this. The top 4 guys they got right. Manning, Brady, Brees, and Rodgers. I'd even say in that order because I think right now what Brady did last year, 25 touchdowns with almost nobody, no offensive line and no defense, and leading him to the number 2 seed in the playoffs, is actually a little bit more impressive than what Brees did with some of his guys in the dome. Rodgers, I'd say should be 4th. I'd say I'd move Ben up to 5th and Luck up to 6th. Wilson, I would say keep probably about 7th, but at the same time, I'd move a lot of those quarterbacks up into the upper echelon. Cam Newton, I would drop because his year wasn't that great, and he had benefited from a really good defense. I'd move Rivers up. I believe he was very underrated this year. His performance, 32 touchdowns and a pass rating of over 105, clearly representing his turnaround. Joe Flacco, he would not even be sniffing this list because to rank him 58th ahead of Nick Foles, Tony Romo, Colin Kaepernick, and Matt Stafford, guys that all had better years than him, is ridiculous. Nick Foles, I didn't talk about him much, but if I had to say anything, he came in and he played very well. He played extremely well the last half of the year. He threw, 27 touchdowns and 2 picks? How many quarterbacks come in their first or second, real years in the league and do those kind of things? I mean, last year he started a few games, he looked okay, and this year a pass rating of 119.2 to lead the league, which is actually a higher rating than Brady had in 2007 when he threw for 50 touchdowns. 8.5%. He was literally throwing a touchdown 8.5% of the time. Just amazing. Just truly amazing the year that he had. And his interception percentage was the 3rd best in NFL history. 0.6%. It's incredible. But again, we're going to have to see some more out of him because he's the most unproven guy on this list. More so than Kaepernick, more so than Luck, more so than Wilson, more so than Newton. The fact he's got the fewest starts and the fact that, you just look at his game, we'll have to see how it changes and evolves over the years because, again, nothing's really certain or sold on this kid. So all in all, continuing with what I said, I'd keep that. I'd keep Foles right where he is in the list. Move Joe Flacco off this list completely. I'd say probably take Colin Kaepernick off the list because, again, his statistics were not that impressive, and he melted down when he needed to play his best. So, and if you look at his record against the top defenses and you look at his numbers, there's really nothing that impressive. I mean, another thing I'd like to point out is that Even in the game they won in the playoffs against the Panthers, Kaepernick still didn't play very well. I mean, Kaepernick completed 15 of 18 for 196 and a touchdown. Didn't lose it, but then again, didn't play very well. So at the same time, I just can't really make an argument for Kaepernick being on this list and somebody like a Matt Ryan who played so much better with so much less to not be on it. But that's just my opinion. Stafford, I leave right where he was. I think he should stay on the list, but at the same time, again, hundreds about where he should be. But honestly, that's just my take on the quarterback list. I feel that I don't think they're changed that much, but I think there's still some guys you need to either put on, take off, or whatnot, do as you will. But I don't really find anything that should tell me that Flacco and Kaepernick should be on this list. I know Kaepernick did reach the NFC title game and lost to Seattle. That helps. But again, very good defense in his corner. Russell Wilson, again, may have had a very good defense in his corner, but unlike Newton and Kaepernick, he stepped it up when he needed to. That's the biggie difference right there. So that's just my take on the topic. I hope you guys enjoyed what I had to say for today. Please be sure to check out my other podcast. I'll be trying to do more now as the NFL season gets underway. And also be sure I will be trying to leave links to Quaman's account on YouTube so you can check out his sports videos that we might do. He also does Dragon Ball Z videos, so if you're a fan of that, be sure to check that out. But thank you guys for listening, and take care and have a good one.